Tēnā koutou te whānau o Auckland Unitarians. Tēnā koutou nā manahiri, no mai, haere mai ki tēnei whare karakia a te atua. Tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou, katoa. Welcome to this space made sacred over the last 115 years by Auckland Unitarians. This is a home where no revealed truths are promoted, and no revealed truths are promoted, and no scripture or human being is accepted as infallible. This is a place for searching for truth. This is a place that we are believers. We believe in intellectual freedom. We believe in justice. We believe in compassion and concern for each other and the whole world. We believe in commitment to those ideals which make us caring and active in the struggles for human dignity. We are a welcoming community, knowing how briefly or long you choose to share this time and space with us, you enrich and strengthen us. As a guest or visitor, you honor us by your presence. Please join us for morning tea. It is our sacrament of hospitality. It will be incomplete without you. This morning, I also want to welcome this morning's speaker and co-worship leader, someone who has been enriching us and strengthening us for a while now, David Hines. David is a journalist, an ordained Methodist minister, an atheist, the leader of the movement to end Bible in schools. He assists his wife, Marion, in her convening of the local Sea of Faith chapter, and is a member of this congregation. I look forward to sharing leadership with you this morning, David.
Our opening words have some good news and some bad news in them. A farmer went out and scattered seed over his field. Some of it fell on the path, and birds came and ate them up. Other seeds fell on rocky ground where they didn't have much soil, and they sprang up quickly, but when the sun rose, they were scorched and withered away. Other seeds fell among thorns, and the thorns grew up and choked them. However, other seed fell on good soil and brought forth grain, some 100-fold, some 60, and some 30.
Blessed is the fire that burns deep in the soul. It is the flame of the human spirit, touched into being by the mystery of life. It is the fire of reason, the fire of compassion, the fire of community, the fire of justice, the fire of faith. It is the fire of love burning deep in the human heart, the divine glow in every life.
Just about every election year, I find myself writing a sermon on why we shouldn't give up on politics. And just about every time it's because of some current news item during the election which brings out despair in many people. And last year, it was many Americans who were despairing of politics because Donald Trump had been voted President of the United States by a very small margin. Earlier the same year, many people in Britain were despairing of politics because of the decision to get out of the European community, again by a very small margin. And to cap it off, this year there's been an early election in Britain called by Theresa May, hoping to get a bigger margin of support, only to find her margin of support is down to almost zero. And we get similar reactions to politics here. And as a result, the number of people who turn out to vote is often very low. It seems many people despair of politics ever producing a satisfactory result. I wonder if there's anybody here who is planning not to vote in the next election. If they are, they're not pleading guilty to it. I wonder if there are any of you who are not sure yet of who you will vote for. So perhaps a bit of uncertainty, it might be the reason for now not being confident. I'd like to break this problem into 4 pieces and say, let's not give up on public opinion. Let's not give up on the justice system. Let's not give up on ourselves and what we can do. And let's not give in to bitterness if we don't get everything that we wanted out of the election. First of all, not to give up on public opinion. One of my favourite quotes about democracy was made 2,500 years ago by the Athenian politician Pericles. He said, not everybody can create public policy, but everybody can judge it. And he regarded democracy as the best system in the world because it brought together the biggest number of people. A number of other countries at that time had advisory councils of nobles and powerful people, but Athens brought the participation down to almost everybody. Well, not everybody. Women did not get the vote and others did not, but they had one of the largest representative bodies in the world. And even those who could not vote in their elections were able to take part in politics in other ways. The ordinary working people were allowed to be on the jury for trials. So that's a bit of their democracy that we have inherited still today. The same idea that Pericles said was stated by American President Abraham Lincoln. He said, you may fool all the people some of the time, and you may fool some of the people all the time, but you can't fool all of the people all of the time. So again, if we give up on politics, then the country is going to miss out on the wisdom that we could have contributed. We might be able to tell some things where the government is going wrong, and if we don't get up and say so, then they will keep on doing it. To give an example of a person with a small sectional interest who had a message to tell and was scared of doing so. A couple of weeks ago, this came up in the news. Now, my wife, Marion, is chair of the Methodist social welfare organisation LifeWise, and you will probably have heard that the government has just agreed to pay the minimum wage for people in caring jobs like this. I know Rachel was working for this. I know lots of you were supporting that. This is a good bit of news. Well, I heard a bit of bad news in amongst the good. I heard that the full flow-on of this minimum wage is not being passed on to other workers. So the government will only be paying the increase to those who are below the minimum wage, and this will shrink the margin for all those above it, and the government is not paying anything to keep up those margins. So these same welfare agencies are going to have trouble keeping their staff. Better staff who deserve a raise will not be getting one because there is no extra funding for that. And this is a bad side of the news that not everybody knows. So I asked Marion, well, are you going to be complaining to the government about this? And she said, well, we think we better not, because otherwise they will start diverting their funds to people who can pay. So here is an example of a small group of people working for aged care welfare who know that something is wrong, and if they don't say so, well, maybe that error will continue and the government will be able to fool all of the people all of the time. So the country needs input from people from all sides of life. Now, when I'm down to take a service or part of a service, being a Christian, I like to look up the Christian lectionary of Bible readings for that day. And it's not always helpful, but quite often I find that it does give you a different perspective on the events of the day. And so today I checked, and sure enough, there was a very helpful lesson about politics. And it was the parable of the sower, which I read to you earlier, of Jesus and how the farmer scattered seed on his ground. Some of it fell on the path. Birds came and ate it up. All sorts of bad things happened to that seed. But the end of the punchline is, some of the seed fell on good soil, and it brought forth grain, some 100-fold, some 60 and 30. Now this is not just a story about preachers, it's a story about politics. It's Jesus saying why he went into public speaking. Because although he might get negative responses from many people, invariably there will be some small group who would hear his message, be switched on, and would be very much helped by it. And he would transform society by reaching those people. He didn't know who those people were who were going to respond to him favorably. But if he preached to everybody, then those who are going to respond would get the message as well. And that, I think, is a very encouraging parable, not just for voters, very encouraging for politicians. They too, this story applies to. There are everybody, every good idea they will have, there will be some people who will thank them when they get it right. My second suggestion, don't give up on the justice system, including the electoral system. And if I could quote the American elections again, the American faith in justice was very heavily tested in their last election. There were accusations that the Russians had been interfering in the election, and that question still hasn't been decisively answered. There were accusations the FBI was biased when Director James Comey, director of the FBI, said he was investigating Hillary Clinton's emails a week or two before the election, and it turned out just a day before the election that she was in the clear. But months later, Comey himself was sacked, and this time there was an accusation that he himself had been biased the other way. And there was suggestions that Trump, in sacking him, was guilty of bias himself. How many ways could they be biased over just a few actions of the FBI? What a Wild West string of complaints. But to me, the impressive thing is how the American justice system was holding up, fighting against all these injustices and holding all these people to account. In the latest scene in this pantomime, Donald Trump Jr. has been forced to admit that he attended a meeting with a Russian lawyer who was trying to give him some bad news, about Hillary Clinton to affect the election. So all these bad things are going on, but the justice system is responding with amazing speed and thoroughness to all of them. Similarly, there were accusations that Trump's campaign was biased against Muslims, and many people were horrified at this. But the justice system stopped them implementing his plan. And so the worst of the plans of Trump have still not come to fruition. So I think there have been some very strong features in the American legal system, but also some dubious ones. A biased president can install biased judges. Our own justice system has flaws too. One is that our courts can't rewrite the laws when something is wrong with them. I'm aware of this because I'm in a campaign to change the law about education in schools to make it more fair to all religions. And even if we win that court case, that is not going to change the law. It's still over to the government. In America, that would change the law. The judges would say, we are rewriting this law. In New Zealand, the courts do not have that power. So there are many ways the justice system can go wrong. And sometimes we get people saying, we shouldn't have to fight like this to get our basic right to justice. Justice should be free, it should be automatic. But that is being childish. Nearly every campaign for justice is a fight, because there are usually other people who benefit from the status quo, and so why would you expect them to give up their privileges without defending them? And so I'd like to quote another parable of Jesus which deals with this very idea of crooked justice. In this story of his, a widow had a claim that somebody was harming her, and she complained to the judge and said, "Give me vengeance against my oppressor." And the judge said to himself, "I don't care about this woman," and so he refused to hear her case. But she kept coming back day after day, coming back and saying, "Hear my case." And finally, the judge said to himself, "Well, I still don't care about this woman, but she is going to give me no peace unless I hear her case." And so he heard it. And the story doesn't say whether she actually won, but she got her case heard. Now, it seems to me this is true of our electoral system. There is no guarantee that the system is going to serve up a just result. But if those who work for justice, if they are persistent, They will get their justice despite the flaws of the system. It seems to me the US elections are flawed because Hillary Clinton won more votes than Donald Trump, but he got more electoral college votes, and so some states had more influence on the result than others. But that was nothing new. The Americans have had that system from the start. And so it seems the politicians in America, the obvious answer is they've got to take account of the system. And if they're going to have a message that is not going to go down in some states, they've got to give special attention to those states. It may not be just, but a person who cares about justice can work through it. And it seems that Donald Trump did his homework on this one better than Hillary Clinton, and that was partly why he got into power. So the message is, it's not enough to have justice on your side. You also have to be persistent and loud. And Donald Trump has those virtues in spades, along with his many negative features. He is making his impact on a system which requires persistence and dedication. A third principle I suggest is that we should not give up on ourselves. We can improve the world with our own private efforts. Martin Luther King III made this point in 2008 at the Democratic Convention in the US. If we are to be a great democracy, we must all take an active role in our democracy. We must do democracy. That goes far beyond simply casting your vote. We must all actively champion the causes that ensure the common good. And I thought that was one of the most inspiring features of the political issues of the last year. To me, the most inspiring thing, I think it was early in June, the United States had been warning that it was going to pull out of the Paris Climate Treaty, and a few weeks before the deadline day for ratifying it, Donald Trump had said he was still thinking, fine-tuning what he was going to do. He might just suggest changes to it, but nobody was surprised when on the day itself he came out and said the United States was going to withdraw from the treaty. And this was the horrific thing that people have been warning against for months, saying how it's going to lead to global warming, it was going to lead to horrendous environmental disasters, storms in parts of the world, droughts in others. And when the actual day came, amazing, the mood of doom seemed to have gone. People right, left and centre were saying, we are still going to stay in the treaty. Every one of the rest of the countries said, we are still staying. Other people were saying, in Germany, for instance, they were saying they're already well down the road of abandoning the use of coal to generate electricity. They are switching nationwide to wind farms and solar heating. India, the second largest developing country in the world, announced that it still has no electricity grid, but it is going to set up one using solar power and wind power. And they're going to not only have to do that massive job, because many of their cities don't have electricity, but it's going to also put a huge national grid so that they can take electricity generated in desert parts of the country into cities which have no reticulated power. They are almost, this was their reaction a couple of days later. And a number of countries, a number of American states said that although the government was not going to support the climate regulations, they would support it. And I think it was one of the leaders of General Motors who said his car company is already gearing to get out of fuel-driven cars and into battery power. So all these people were basically treating Disaster Day as just a day to roll up their sleeves and do something themselves. Even on a small level like ourselves, we can do things privately, and this should be a reason why we shouldn't despair. The most recent case is the pantry outside, and congratulations to both of you who've been working, David and Faye, for doing that. And as I came in here this morning, I was walking past there, and two people were over looking at it, and they said, "What a brilliant idea!" So you're constantly. They neither gave food nor took any away, but it lifted their mood about politics in New Zealand. So I think that's a marvelous message to all of us not to give up on ourselves. Even if politics doesn't deliver, we can deliver it ourselves. And lastly, I'd say my fourth suggestion is don't give in to bitterness. There is a certain amount of disappointment built into politics because politicians make choices and invariably we don't get everything our own way. And we tend to think in terms of winners and losers, which is a pity because as we've been hearing in our Wednesday night lectures, the best way to treat conflicts is to look for win-win solutions where both sides have some input into the result. And ideally, our politicians too will be looking for win-win solutions, which they are trying to do, but with different fine-tuning of the same issues. But some people are still going to be unhappy with everything that is on offer. And that suggests to me that maybe the trouble is not with the politicians, but maybe the trouble is those people who cannot see anything positive in politics at all. A week ago, there was one day in the Herald, they have 2 pages of letters to the editor, about 30 letters altogether, and all 30 of those were negative. And most of them were quoting various political events and political promises and saying how disastrous it was. And the 2 or 3 that were not slamming politicians were slamming the Auckland City Council and the Mayor. And I thought, what sort of a city are we in where nobody can find anything good this particular day? And when I looked at those, it really puzzled me a bit, because when I looked at those criticisms they made in the Herald, quite a few of them had a point. Some of them might actually have been right, but I still couldn't quite get my head around the fact that nobody could find a single positive thing that day. Nobody could find that the Green Party had just got a plan to speed up the light rail going out to the airport, or that the Labour Party had policies to help people on low incomes, or that the National Party was promising them tax cuts. I mean, all these, surely everybody would find one of those things they liked. But I got my hand on the subject when it was more personalised, when I looked at my Facebook page a few days ago, and one of my Facebook friends, this was the day after we won the America's Cup, and he wrote on my Facebook page, "What a terrible waste of money. It's a rich man's sport. How much this money could have been used for families in financial difficulty." And I thought, well, so it could. Any tax dollar could be spent on any subject you like to name. But isn't that really totally looking at the negative side? And this reminded me of a third parable of Jesus about people who are bitter and who feel that they can't do anything and can't approve anything. The parable of the talents is about 3 slaves, one of whom was always complaining because he didn't have enough compared with other people. One of the 3 slaves, when his master left town and left him to mind his property, one of them was given $5 billion, another was given $2 billion, and the third one was only given $1 billion, and so he was despairing. What can I do with only $1 billion? And he was so miserable that he buried his $1 million in the ground. This particular friend of mine, who hated the America's Cup, is a minister and has a church full of people he is leading. And I felt sorry for him that day, that he couldn't think of anything positive, only wanted to complain that we won the America's Cup. And this started me looking into the Tyndall Foundation, because it was one of the biggest contributors to the America's Cup. And I thought, do they just back rich people's games? And so I looked up their website, and no, the foundation gives to dozens of causes. And one of them is it gives thousands of dollars to the LifeWise homeless campaign. And I noticed that they also give money to civil rights projects. They're one of the few charities in New Zealand that actually has civil rights on its list of things to give money to. So I thought, how? I could claim some of that money. I'm working on a civil rights campaign. And in fact, I'm going to write a letter to Steve Tyndall. And in my letter, I certainly will not complain that they helped us to win the America's Cup. So don't give up on politics. There are many good things that we can do. I'd like to open up our thoughts with a winter meditation from the Jewish poet Isaiah. He said, "As the rain and snow fall from the clouds and don't return until they have watered the earth, making it bud and sprout, giving seed for the farmer and bread for the eater, so may the goodness of life rain down on you. May it refresh you. May you grow and achieve your calling. May it finish the task it came to do."
For our closing words, mindful of our highest aspirations, bound by common faith and purpose, and yet beginning with ourselves as we are, let us take one more step together in our unending quest for dignity, justice, and love. Amen.